Hi there, everyone. We are so happy to have you, whether you are joining us here today or watching later on the Cure GABA-A YouTube channel. My name is Monica Joanna Alnacave, and I'm the founder and CEO of Cure GABA-A, a nonprofit organization with the sole focus to develop potential therapies for GABA-A variants by partnering with world-renowned researchers in GABA-A and the Organization of Patients for Clinical Trials. Today we welcome Elizabeth Rountree, who is the Diagnostics Lead for COMBINEDBrain, a nonprofit organization devoted to speeding the path to clinical treatments for people with rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders by pooling efforts, studies, and data. Project Find Out aims to establish symptom criteria for rapid whole genome sequencing in infants with rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. I'm handing it off to you, Elizabeth. Please share with us this exciting new opportunity that you've created.
Thank you so much, and I'm so excited to be here. I really appreciate you letting us talk about Project Find Out, which is near and dear to our hearts. So as you mentioned, Combined Brain is an organization that's really focused on rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. We support about 95 different patient advocacy groups with scientific support, ranging from diagnostics, where I focus, to natural history studies, biomarker studies, biorepositories, and more. But today we will be focusing on Project Find Out. As many families who have a rare genetic neurodevelopmental diagnosis know, the path to diagnosis can be quite difficult and long. And underdiagnosis and late diagnosis are significant problems. Based on some data analysis that we've done, less than 25% of children that have a rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorder have a confirmed genetic diagnosis. And access to genetic testing is inequitable. There's not equal coverage. Some insurance covers it, some insurances don't. Some families have to pay out of pocket. Some families can't afford that. And the time in that small cohort of families that do have a diagnosis, that time to diagnosis is about 30 months from initial symptoms to a diagnosis, which is I think in many people's opinion, much too long. And Every Life Foundation did a study last year where they found that this delay in diagnosis can cost between $80,000 and $500,000 in avoidable medical costs and productivity costs per patient. So early diagnosis is much needed. It can improve patient outcomes and allow patients to benefit from effective therapies and clinical trials. And it also will, potentially save money in the long term while also providing significant benefits to families. So we've created Project Find Out to really move the needle on early diagnosis. And so this is a research study that provides whole genome sequencing to patients who have symptoms of rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders. And we have a couple of different aims. From a research perspective, we're really looking to understand what are the symptoms that are used to identify rare genetic neurodevelopmental disorders at different age ranges. We're starting with infants between 3 and 12 months of age, but we'd like to expand the program to include school-age kids and adults. A second objective is to understand, well, if you provide whole genome sequencing to this population, what is the diagnostic yield? What percent of families get a diagnosis and kind of in their diagnostic odyssey? Our third set of objectives revolves around, well, how useful is this information? How useful is it to physicians to help them with their decision-making and recommendations on treatments? How useful is it to caregivers? And then how useful is it to the society as a whole and insurance companies in terms of healthcare utilization? And our ultimate goal is to really influence the development of national guidelines so that it's clear for which patients should get tested. We want to influence payer coverage policy so that there's equitable coverage of genetic testing in appropriate patients, and then also build capacity at the local level for genetic testing in communities. So Find Out we've tried to make really simple, straightforward eligibility criteria Find out is the acronym for which patients are eligible for testing. So you can see here feeding issues, movement issues, NICU admission, developmental delay, other. We had an O, and so we had many things to fit into it. So that made the acronym work. Unprovoked seizures and problems with tone. And so any infant that's 3 to 12 months of age is here in the US, because we are only providing services in the US right now, hasn't had previous whole genome sequencing, and meets 2 of these criteria, is eligible. And once they're eligible, the project provides genetic counseling, free whole genome sequencing, and it is a clinical whole genome sequencing. So the families can share it with their physicians and use it to inform kind of treatment decisions. And we've tried to make the process for enrolling and participating in Project Find Out really simple and straightforward. So we have a website called projectfindout.org. And on the website, there are these bright orange enroll now buttons. And so any family that's interested can come directly to the website and enroll. They don't have to talk to their physician or convince somebody to make a referral if a family feels like their child would benefit from genetic testing. They can just come to the website. Physicians who are interested in referring patients can either just tell patients about the website, or we do have a referral form on the website also. The process is pretty straightforward. It's genetic testing, so it's not always the most simple process, but we've tried to make this each individual step pretty straightforward. So once a family enrolls, we do an online assessment. We meet first with the parents and collect some information, tell them about the study, explain the risks and benefits, walk through a consent. The second step is then we meet with the family and the baby, and we do a virtual assessment over, Zoom or FaceTime or just over a phone call, whatever is easy. If the infant meets the criteria, then we send out the test kit directly to the family. It's a buccal swab, so it's really just, collecting some saliva and cells from the cheek. So it's a fair amount of saliva, but it's a pretty straightforward process, especially for most babies tend to have a lot of saliva, so it hasn't been a problem so far. The test kit gets sent back to our sequencing partner, which is the Broad Institute. Once they've done their analysis and issued the report, then our genetic counseling partner, Guide Genetics, provides free genetic counseling, again, over the phone. And then we work with the family and the family's pediatrician to help make sure that it's really clear kind of what referrals are appropriate and what the right next steps are. We then have a follow-up about 6 months after the initial enrollment, just to collect feedback and make sure that the experience was positive and that the families found it useful. So that's kind of the spiel on Project Find Out. Thank you so much for letting me talk about it, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Elizabeth. I can actually speak to the timeline of delayed diagnosis because it took my daughter 9 months to receive her diagnosis. And like you said, in that time, we missed out on a lot of PTOT, speech therapy. So I can really appreciate what you guys are doing. I have a few questions for you. You mentioned that the service is provided only in the US. Is that specifically for US residents, or can someone travel into the US to enroll?
Someone could travel into the US and enroll. We just can only ship the kits to people that are physically in the US at the time.
Okay, that's really great. And do you also enroll siblings that don't have symptoms?
We do not enroll siblings that do not have symptoms. So we're only doing a test of the infant, of the baby that's having symptoms. We do have connections with other research studies, and so certainly can share those if a family would be interested in having a child enrolled into another study, or if the family would like to get testing.
Okay, great. And Augustina wants to know, what is the difference between whole genome sequencing and whole exome sequencing?
That is such a great question. I wish I had my geneticist partners here. But when we were putting together the project, we evaluated many different types of testing. So there's kind of panels that are done, which have a limited number of genes that they test for. Then there's whole exome sequencing, which tests kind of certain parts of the DNA. And then there's whole genome sequencing, which is a little more comprehensive in the testing that's done. And in our research and kind of looking through the data, we saw that the greatest percent of patients received a diagnosis with the whole genome sequencing. And so that's why we decided to offer our whole genome as part of our study.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us here today. We are so excited to watch Project Find Out become a success. Bye.